anyway, it was a life-changing moment for my mother, profoundly, because she was trained to be an organist and a pianist, and very advanced training, and very gifted in music. And so she was trying to make me deeply understand and experience music, so taking me to the opera, taking me to the concerts was part of my childhood, and it was very, very powerful. It was a very powerful part of it. And I'd get real intense, and it was a really big deal. So anyway, this was a life-changing moment for her. And as the years went by, Sam considered my mother his mother. His mother died when he was 15 of cancer during World War II. And, he had some things he was ashamed about because, he's a 15-year-old boy and the war's on and so on. But, but this really became very important to him. And so Mother went with me to the Holy Land 6 times, which many of the family may not know that. So it was on that same day that I was healed in the Jordan River. So all of that happened in that first day. And we were only there 5 days. But it was very memorable.
Wasn't this 1968?
Yes.
Okay, just double checking.
And the first day I was ever in Israel. Okay. At the time I looked like a survivor from Auschwitz. I was a chain smoker, drank 10 cups of coffee a day, had dark circles under my eyes, and was just recovering from major, major trauma. So that's where I was. And the trip was very good for me. It was important to tell you how I paid for the trip.
Uh-oh.
Because when I was 10 years old, my parents brought a New York life insurance salesman to the house to sell me a life insurance policy, which I had to pay for at 10. So I had that policy, and it was paid in full, and I cashed it in. And it was really an important decision for my life to make that journey, because it was totally life-changing for me.
Set the wheels in motion.
But that gives you an idea of the world I was raised in. I was raised to be in an adult world and developed in that world. So anyway, every time we went to Israel, I would beg Sam to sing Pagliacci. And so 6 times he did this. And on the 7th trip, the Lord spoke to me and said, do not ask him. So I didn't. And I'm at their house, and I'm going to the airport the next morning, and it's evening, and there's only one channel on Israeli TV at that time. And he says, come quick, come quick. I go, and it's a tenor singing Pagliacci. So God knew this and wanted somebody else to do it. And we entered into Pagliacci again. So several years later, when my mother was dying, and she had about a year to live, and she was in really bad shape, Sam came from Israel for a party in her honor. I mean, that's how important the relationship was. There were about 150 people there.
When?
Well,
in 84. Oh, 86.
No, 86, so it would have been 85.
August of 85.
So that's how much
we were
later.
at CRC for this one?
Mm-mm.
Or was that Roy?
I think that was Roy.
Okay.
So, or maybe it was when she died and then I went to CRC. But I'm talking about this party was a year before that. And she had very bad dementia. And so at the party, Sam came over to the house. They lived in a mobile home. And he said, Laura, what do you want me to sing for her? And she said Pagliacci. And that was the last word she ever spoke. For the next year, she was nonverbal. So that's how important it is. And it's very significant in the history of how that unfolded and in what way this great thing happened in our lives. I had been raised on opera. I had been to the opera. I knew the importance of it, so it was just important to me.
You also took us to the opera home.
It is part of their childhood development. So gradually, Sam is still alive. He's 95. He has a caregiver. He calls me about once a week. And we're very connected for life. We made a decision several years ago that we'd be, his sisters had all died, and that I would be his sister, and he would be my brother, because I never had any brothers. So that's how serious the relationship is. And so that's why, you know, he stays in touch with me, and it's a very important part of the history of the family. And he influenced my life dramatically forever. For example, I knew nothing about the Holocaust. So he taught me about the Holocaust. And that he taught me things I didn't know. And I was in Israel 24 times. And most people don't realize I went so much. And of course, I'd go to the Palestinian territory, and then I'd go back to Israel, then I'd go back to Palestinian territory,
The
back
boundaries
to
changed
Israel.
so much too.
Yes. And Sam Bar-El and Yassine and Majid and the bus driver, we were all friends. And we would meet together, and they would, Yassine and Majid would lead the tour part, and Sam and Shevik would lead the other part of the tour. And then we'd trade in Jerusalem and trade buses and trade areas. So that's how closely we worked together and how important the relationship was.
And you'd have to walk across the border, like get off the bus.
No, it was in Jerusalem. We did this at the American colony.
Oh.
We exchanged buses. And,
Maybe it was between Jordan and
Yes.
Israel that I remember.
so anyway, that's how important the development of the work. Sam and Fanny went to Yassine's parents' house to meet them personally.
And that's a big deal for that.
And that's a very big deal for a Jewish person from Israel to go to the West Bank and go to a Palestinian house.
Very
So he was very, very dedicated to helping, and he still has a relationship with them, and it's still a very strong relationship. He will call them, he will check on them, they check on him. So it's really a significant relationship. Back to Pagliacci, I think that was a turning point in my mother's life, because it defined something inside of her that she'd never found. I don't think my dad and my mother were in love until maybe the end of their marriage. And in fact, my dad told me when they were married 38 years, he'd never loved her. So I read all their love letters, which you gave me, and I found, and I read all of them, covering 5 years of time in their relationship. So I have a better picture of what was going on and how things were skewed. But she had mental illness, and it was not an easy situation for either one of them. So that's why it's really something that's a part of the history of the family, and how all of that led to the things that happened. And he was the only witness besides my mother to my healing in the Jordan River. And what happened in the Jordan River was I had believed I was going to hell for 17 years. And that's why I was in such bad shape, because my mother would say, I'd like to forgive you, but I can't, which meant God couldn't. And so it just canceled me. And in the Jordan River, the Lord came to me himself and spoke to me and accepted me. And I cried for joy for 1 year. And when I came home, Jerry bawled me out for a year for spending the money to go on the trip and was on my case constantly about that. And I was crying for joy because I had been changed totally. I had been accepted. I was full of joy. So that's how I got well on that first day. And Sam's a part of the story of all of us in the family. He considers that we are the best of friends he ever had in his life, and that my mother was his mother, and it was just a very, very deep bonding. So him being at the dinner, her saying the last word she ever spoke, Pagliacci, him singing, that's why it's important tonight that we watched it. And we heard that, and we saw that, and we saw, what was going on. And he lived in Italy. When the war was over, he was able to go across the country and get to Italy, and lived in Italy for a year and studied opera. And he actually loved an Italian girl, I think, quite deeply at that time. But then he went to Israel and went in, as an illegal going in. They used to come in boats and they'd come in. And that's how he got to Israel.
And the rest is history.
But that 1 year in Italy, he speaks fluent Italian. He sings, he has great gifts. Recently, he has a caregiver from India, and the caregiver's name is Waz, W-A-S. And Waz's wife belongs to a church in India. And he said, Sam, I want to put you on Zoom to speak and sing at the church in India. And Waz is a very strong Christian. During this time, Sam's son decided he wanted nothing to do with his father the best of his life, and just, as far as he was concerned, his dad was dead. He was mad at the way where Fanny was put, where her body was put. I mean, just, stupid things. So he had me praying and praying and praying and praying for Avi's healing. At the 30th anniversary of the Jordan River event, I went to Israel, and I made a trip to the Jordan. And then I got there, I wondered why I'd done that. I asked Sam to take us, there were 3 or 4 of us going, and I thought, I wondered, I just asked him to drive us to the Jordan, period, for this anniversary. So I got there and I thought, wow, this is kind of weird. What'll I do now? But while I was there, I thanked him for all the things that he'd done to make our family well and to make us understand the bigger picture in life. And then he said, I have a favor to ask of you. And this was the favor. His son Avi had mental problems and had tried to commit suicide. And he asked me to pray and change Avi in some way. And he said, I don't care if you make Avi a Christian. My son needs help. So I've been praying for Avi for many years. And when I went to New York, largely it was to see Mohammed's family, but it was also to see Avi. So I would see him, and connect with him. And so I know what happened, although no one told me. But Sam called me one day, and he said, I have become a Christian. Well, this is an astonishing thing for Sam to say. But I knew why. Because I knew that Waz had said, let's pray in Jesus' name and see what happens. Within 20 minutes, Avi called, and then called him every day. So that changed him to being hostile, or, it isn't that he's not Jewish, that's not what it is. It's just accepting the fact that Christ is the Messiah, and feels, and we've never discussed it. It just told me that, but I knew it. I knew exactly what happened. So, and by saying to me at that 30th anniversary, I don't care if you make Avi a Christian, you could see there was a release going on there, because he loved his son, and it was very, very important to him. So that's one way that the family was deeply changed. When Jerry and I went to Israel, when his daughter got married and attended the wedding, and it was a very big deal, and Sam said, you may invite all your Palestinian friends to the wedding from the West Bank. And he had 3 tables up for the Palestinians, at his daughter's wedding. That's a pretty big deal, let me tell you, because they live in the West Bank and he lives in Tel Aviv. So at the wedding, at the dinner, there was music and dancing and so on. And then it came to an end, and at that point, Sam sang the Lord's Prayer. So that's kind of the thing that happened over the years, much influence. I took him to the church, First Christian Church, and we sat there for an hour looking at the picture of Jesus and talked about it, how this had influenced my whole life. So, that's kind of the story of our relationship and why it was so important. And it was important to Fanny. It was important to his daughter. It was important to the whole family. I met every family member. I knew all of them. So it was not just a small picture. It was a really big picture. So that's the story of Pagliacci and how it opened a door that never closed.
Mm-hmm.
Sam became head of all the tour guides in Israel for many years. And they put out a guide about every 3 months or so. And he would always mail them to me. And they were all in Hebrew, but his picture was in there, and I knew that's what he wrote for the guide, but he wanted me to have that. He wanted me to know that. It was part of the intimacy between us. For example, he took me to meet the bear of Bethlehem. And he made sure that we got legalization and sent us to the perfect lawyer to get the legalization for Astus so that they would be safe. So, all the way through, there's been this building. And on his 70th birthday, Jerry and I went to Israel for his birthday. Yasin, Majid, were all at a dinner. I took everybody to dinner at the American Colony for his 70th birthday. So that's kind of an interesting story.
I love the American Colony.
That we would fly to Israel just for his 70th birthday.
I love that place.
And Jerry had to get out of school. He was teaching, and he had to take a 6-month sabbatical. And of course, he was going to teach all but the few days we were going to be gone in Israel. But that's what it took to get that paid freedom to go to the Israel for Sam's birthday. So there's always been a very high priority, and he's going to die about the same time I do. He's old, and has a caregiver, and it's a hard going down, but he's staying at home, and it's a very significant family event when he passes. And he opened many, many doors and made possible the things that were needed, and he trusted me absolutely. And whatever I asked him to do, 100% of the time, we did it. 100% of the time. We stayed as long as I needed to stay. We left when I said, now we can go, so that people could experience something, not just go and tour. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It was personal. They had time to take it in and to understand it. Mm-hmm. So that's the story of how this man has affected the history of the family. And I thought that was important for you to know tonight.
Mm-hmm.
She's also a very, very passionate opera. Very.
Oh, yeah, my mother just absolutely could not believe it, And we were in a private tour, and he took us around in the car for 5 days. We were not with a tour group. She was very sick and wasn't doing very well, and so he and I had a lot of bonding time, and I got his daughter to be a pen pal to Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went, I think was it 4 years later?
Yeah, 72.
I took Michelle, and I notified Sam that I was going to go to Italy and leave Michelle in Israel, his family's house, with his mother, his wife, and Eddie. And she didn't speak any English at all. Fanny, none, zero. So that's how your mother happened to spend 10 days in Israel and then fly home all by herself
Very educational.
from Israel to through Copenhagen, overnight in Copenhagen, get a hotel, and fly clear here at 17 years of age. So these were very great opportunities for Michelle to understand what it would take to take care of herself and to figure things out. I was a very hard mother because I created situations where they had to do things that no mother would ask their kids to do. But I was creating strength in them, a lot of strength in them, so that they could survive no matter what they had to survive without just giving up. So that's how the Barrels, and she considers Sam
Abba.
a father figure to her, and he considers her a daughter of the family. And he's very, very close to Michelle. And she went 4 times with me to the Holy Land. And that's why. So these were the good parts of her life. These were the things that gave her purpose and strength. And the terrible parts were really terrible. But that's good, because the strength is there.
If you change anything in your life, you won't be who you are.
I know.